Real life.
Superpowers.
We are already in this mindset that we're actually going to sell the company. 3 months later, we went to the board. We told them, look, we're going to shut down the company. We feel like we will not be able to recover from the situation that we are right now at, even if we raise more money. And we think that the best decision is actually to shut the company down.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Life Superpowers podcast, the show that brings you closer to individuals who, through hard work, innovation, and vulnerability, redefine the term superpowers in our 21st century context. I'm Noah Eshed, co-hosting here with Renan Menipaz. In today's episode, we're traveling to the crossroads of cybersecurity and blockchain technology, where our guest has been a prominent figure and an influential force. Our guest is Idan Ofrat, CPO and co-founder of Fireblocks, a groundbreaking platform dedicated to securing digital assets. When it comes to defending the cyber frontiers, Idan's track record speaks for itself. Prior to Fireblocks, Idan was a key player at C4 Security. He's also an expert in decentralized technologies. He was the co-founder and CTO at Yeloha, a disruptive platform aiming to decentralize energy trading, as well as VP of products at Orbs, a public blockchain designed for high-scale apps. Today, we delve into his story. So join us in welcoming Idan to the show.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive!
Real life.
Superpowers.
Idan, welcome to Real Life Superpowers.
Hey, Dan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Where are you located?
I'm based now in Tel Aviv. Our office is in Tel Aviv.
And what's that office? What do you do these days? What are you focusing on?
On my professional life, Fireblocks, we're focusing on growing the company, the business, scaling, and also entering a lot of new, exciting, emerging use cases and new markets, traditional finance, payments, and non-financial use cases of the blockchain, things like gaming, consumer brands, minting NFTs, and so on. And I have a personal life, not much time for my personal life, but I have 3 kids. And the oldest one is 9 years old, and I have 2 young ones. One is 3.5 years old, and the other is 2.5 years old. And actually, both of them got born during the hyper growth of Fireblocks. And so, side by side with growing the company, it was also raising small kids. And now, for the first time, like the sleepless nights of waking up to crying babies and changing diapers are finally behind me. So it's much more fun now, and much more time with them. It's really great to see them growing.
And do you feel like the fact that this isn't your first rodeo and we can basically say you're a serial entrepreneur, so is that helping you in a sense to navigate the challenges of being a parent to toddlers and being an entrepreneur and having to lead in a sense both at home, because as Renan is always talking about how when you have kids, you're sort of a leader also at home because you have to suddenly be that person they look up to. And then there's the leadership that you have to convey at work. So is it helpful that you're experienced?
Yeah, it's helpful. I think that one of the things that you find out actually when you need to kind of juggle parenthood and entrepreneurship is that it's like highways, right? That no matter how many lanes you have, eventually kind of there is a kind of a certain amount of time or resources that you have, and somehow you manage to kind of juggle them, right? So it's not like if I had more time, I would probably do it better. I think that parenthood really allows you to manage your time better. And the fact that it's not the first time, both in my entrepreneurial life and the fact that I'm not a parent for the first time, right? I can already have an older kid really helps me in this aspect. I'm trying not to do the same mistakes twice. So growing kids, one kid and then another kid and then another kid, I think helps me kind of at least not repeat the same mistakes that I did before. And same applies for my company.
As an independent entrepreneur, okay, you can do whatever you want, but how do you explain to the time management to your kids or even your work? As an example, saying, okay, guys, I have to go to my kids. Okay. Oh, he's never in the meetings, or opposite, Dad, can't you take a break and be with us today? And you say, I have to go to work, or how do you manage that? Because you always have to say no to everybody. So you're disappointing.
Yeah, I think that I got used to disappointing a lot of people over the last few years of telling them that I don't have enough time, right? It's something that you need to change your mindset and acknowledge the fact that you have limited time. And if you have more things that you need to, as I said, juggle between, eventually you need to give up something. I think that one of the things that I probably gave up more are things like friends that I meet probably less than before. Going back to your comment, by the way, the leader home is actually my wife, is my partner in life. She has more time for the kids. This is kind of an unwritten agreement between us since started Fireblocks, that she is the one more focused on the kids, although she also has her own career. She knows that I have less time. It's not just about, by the way, the amount of time that I need to devote to the company, but also the fact that we are now a global company. So I need to also be available in other time zones. So I have meetings during evenings, and my kids know that. It's not that they're always happy with that, but they know that daddy has a customer meeting. My girl knows, since I think she's 3 years old, that there is a thing called the customer call. Daddy now has a customer call. I need to be in another room and not bother him. So this is kind of how we manage our life for the last few years. And I think that over time you learn how to manage everything together. So one of the things that I'm doing is, for instance, is to have a certain slot just for my kids where people know that they can't interrupt me, and vice versa. I have time for work, and then this time I'm very focused on work, and I don't get all the kind of family issues to interrupt in this way.
In a sense, your wife is your co-founder of the family. And I would say also that the kids are looking up to both of you because, like it or not, you're both leading in their eyes. Would you advise your kids to become entrepreneurs?
Wow, that's a great question. Actually, I've never thought of that. If it's something that I would recommend or not. I think that the best advice that I have for my kids, and this is something that also my parents told me, is to really follow what you believe in and just be whatever you want, right? It's not about being an entrepreneur or not. I would give them all the warning signs of what it means to be an entrepreneur based on my experience. There are upsides, but there are also downsides, right? There are cons and pros to everything. And I would tell them that it's hard, right? It's hard to be an entrepreneur. You might find yourself very likely failing, and it's not for everyone. It's definitely not for everyone, and they need to ask themselves if it's the right thing for them. And it's not the right thing for most people, so there is a very good chance that it won't be the right thing for them as well.
How do you check? How do you know if it's the right thing for you or not?
One way to do it is to just try, right, and see if it fits you or not. I think that one of the things that I tell people, there are people coming to me with ideas, and then they ask me about my entrepreneurial life, and then they ask me, should I be an entrepreneur? Actually, a good friend of mine came to me a few months ago. He was employed, he was an employee. He was never an entrepreneur. He's now almost 40 years old, and he asked me, should I be an entrepreneur? And I told him, look, it's really something that you need to decide for yourself. But I can tell you my journey. It's just one data point, and I advise you to just ask as many people as possible and see if it's something that fits you. But I think that the most important question that you need to ask yourself is why? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur in the first place? For me, it was kind of more intuitive. I wasn't an entrepreneur when I got born, and even like when I finished my military service, and my first job wasn't as an entrepreneur. I was an employee for another company, and while working for this company, I realized that actually what I want to do is to build my own stuff, and this is kind of the journey that I went through. So everyone should ask himself, what do I need to be, and whether entrepreneurship is suitable for me or not.
What was it about being an employee that triggered that need of yours to build something of your own, do you think?
I think it was the fact that despite the fact that I had a lot of impact, I was the first employee or the first full-time employee of this company. It was a startup company. I had a lot of impact. I managed the R&D team. I always felt that I want to do it my own way, and that I would do things a bit differently. So again, it doesn't mean that you don't have impact. You can be an employee of a company and have a lot of impact, sometimes more than the founders. I even find it Fireblocks, where in some areas we have very talented people, senior or junior, that have a lot of impact on the business. But eventually I wanted to bring my own values, and I wanted to bring my own culture. And if you get lucky, you actually find yourself in a company that really fits what you believe in. But I felt that the best way to do it is actually to bring my own values and kind of the way I want to do things to the business. The best way to do it is basically building something on your own.
Did you have something that you wanted to build, or was this more a concept that you want to embark on your own journey?
So it was more of a concept. Side by side with that, I did have a lot of ideas of things that I want to build. It started actually when I was 10 or 11 years old. I started coding in a very young age. Like, as I said, when I was already, I think, 11 years old, learned by myself to code in Pascal, C++, assembly. In 1996, when JavaScript emerged, I immediately taught myself how to build websites. And I was always in this mindset that I want to build stuff. I consider myself as a builder. So naturally, when I was employed by a company, I always had this kind of things that I wanted to build, that I couldn't do it in this framework because it was really outside the things that were like the market that we operated at. But conceptually, I felt like I want to build my own things from scratch. I want to hire my own people. I want to come up with my own ideas. I want to bring my own values. This was kind of the main motivation there.
We're excited to be collaborating with the Israeli website CTech, owned by Kalkalist, Israel's leading business newspaper. CTech is the gateway of the Israeli high-tech to the tech world and vice versa. If you're not already a regular reader, we strongly recommend that you check out kalkalistech.com, CALCALISTECH.com, to stay up to date on all high-impact stories from the Israeli tech scene.
And what you said, you wanted to do things your way. Why is that? What is so good about your way?
It's not that it's better, by the way. I think that there are things that I do better, but there are things that I do worse. It was more that I want to do it my own way because I felt that it would be just much more fun for me, just much more enjoyable to build this environment where basically you bring your own stuff, right? Like, you decide what kind of people you want to work with, you decide what kind of values are important to you. There are companies that appreciate more things like work-life balance. There are companies that want to grow faster. For instance, like in the first company that I was at, they had this amazing rule where you couldn't find anyone at the office after 6 p.m. The founder said, like, I'm going to leave now and I'm going to spend time with my kids for the next few hours. And it's amazing. I think it's amazing, right, to have this kind of rules, but it wasn't suitable for me. I told them, actually, what I want to do is to build something that grows very fast. They were more into the bootstrapping mindset. And I told them, no, actually, I want to grow this company very fast. And the best way to do that is to raise money from investors. You need to give up some of your shares and grow fast. So there are a lot of these nuances and little things that you want to do your own way And this was basically what led me to the decision of building my own startup.
And what did you decide to build?
So I had a very long journey of ideation, and I looked at a lot of different markets. Back in 2010, the market that I looked at was actually offline merchants and kind of brick and mortar stores, and I thought how to improve the experience there. And then in 2012, this was my first real startup experience in a way, where I managed to raise money from investors, and it was a journey of 4 years. I focused on solar energy. This was after a decade that actually what I focused on was mostly cybersecurity. And then I said, okay, I'm going to shift to a completely different type of market. And I also wanted to do good, right? Like one of the things that I told myself is that I want to focus on something that is really doing good for humanity. And I decided to focus on renewable energy.
But this was not your first startup, right?
It was my first well-funded startup in a way, but it wasn't my first attempt to build something. I think that I had around 3 attempts before this journey of meeting or finding your co-founders, starting to build something, to validate something. I had this kind of process for, I think, at least 4 or 5 times in the last 13 years.
And what went wrong with the previous ones?
Wow, everything. I think that the first thing was actually around market validation. This is something that I think I didn't do well in most of the attempts. This was kind of the main conclusion that I came to the Fireblocks journey with, that you need to do a very proper market validation before you start building something. But I think that in some cases, we just didn't have the best idea. In some cases, after a while, I found out that these are not the people that I actually want to spend to partner with for the next few years in my life. Like, some of them were basically good friends of mine that I really like enjoying going to going to a bar with and have beer with, but these weren't the right people to build something with.
How did you know that they weren't the right people?
In retrospect, I think it was something very intuitive. Like it's something that I really felt kind of deep in my heart. It wasn't something very analytical. It's just a feeling, like, you carry yourself, like, with this feeling, if these are the right people. I always like to compare it to dating, right? Like, it's not something that you can rationalize. There is some kind of a feeling that you have, whether these are the people that you want to spend the next years of your life with, and you're going to spend more time with them than with your partner in life, right? Like, with your girlfriend or your wife, and it's people that you need to feel very comfortable with. I think that in many cases, what I found out is that it needs to be people that are a bit similar to you, but also complementary in a way that you feel like they complement you and they bring to the table something that you don't bring, and people that you trust and they share pretty much the same values as you are. It's a journey. But I think that after already a few months, you can really sense if these are the people that you want to spend kind of your entrepreneurial life with.
But what do? You're a few months in, you're invested, and it doesn't have to be money, but overall invested with time and efforts. What do? A few months in, you realize that some of the people you're working with are not really the people you want to be running forward with.
So you break up with them, like, professionally, right? Like, they can still be your, good friends of yours. And I did that. Like, I remember a couple of times. It was hard. It's like really breaking up from your kind of your partner or girlfriend. I came to them, and it wasn't like I told them that I don't want to be with them or don't want to continue this journey with them. I was just very transparent with them. And basically, I reflected to them what I was thinking. I'm a very blunt person in my nature, especially with people that are very close to me. Sometimes it can be offensive, but I basically told them, look, I'm not sure that we're kind of sharing the same ideas, or that. And in most cases, you could find out that they actually feel the same, right? Like, it's it's mutual, so it makes it easier. If you are already vested and you already have a good idea, it's a bit harder. But I did it. I think it's the right thing to do eventually. Otherwise you can find yourself spending years of your life with the wrong feeling.
But then what do? You break up with the startup as well?
So in one of the times, it was basically I continued myself without my partner. And shortly after, I found out that also the idea itself is not very good. In another case, actually this is the last one before Fireblocks. I was doing something, building something with my co-founder for more than a year, and at some point, basically, it was kind of both breaking the partnership between us, but also breaking the idea in a way, like breaking the entire venture that we had. I decided to eventually, what you find out is that sometimes there is this coupling between the type of idea that you bring and the co-founder, the person or the team that you partner with, and then usually it just goes together. You can find yourself basically breaking the entire package, the partnership and the idea. But it doesn't have to be this way.
So there were a few such attempts that didn't go right, and then you decided to start an impact-driven venture. And that you decided you're going to focus on and also raise money for. And then what?
So I teamed up with two co-founders. It was back in 2012. We managed to raise our seed round, $1 million. To make a long story short, we were running it for more than 4 years. The concept there was basically we had this very ambitious idea of building a decentralized energy company. It was kind of like a Airbnb for solar energy, where basically the idea was to match solar roof owners with people that want to buy green solar energy. And what we found out is that there are so many obstacles in the way that it requires much more resources that what we're anticipating in day one. That there are a lot of regulatory challenges that we need to work around, and that we also we found ourselves building a consumer brand here from Israel for the American market, right? It was we were focusing on the US market, and we found out that only in retrospect that we don't have any clue on what the US market needs. And I think that one of the things that occurred to me after raising the first round, like the seed round, is that when you start a company, usually the first thing that most people focus on is actually raising money. And raising money is important. It's an oxygen for the company. You can't build stuff usually without raising money unless you are very hands-on. You can't hire employees. You can't pay to your lawyers to do all the legal work around it without raising money. And a lot of people just trying to optimize for that. But actually, I wouldn't say that it's easy. It would be arrogant for me to say that it's easy, but it's not the thing, it's just a means to an end. This is not the thing that you need to optimize for. And actually, once you raise a round and you have money in the bank, then things starts becoming actually more complicated. The clock really starts ticking when you raise your first round, when you have money in the bank, because then you have investors and you have a board, and you can tell your board, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to start ideating things and I'm going to explore them for the next 10 years, right? They have a certain model, kind of a financial model, where they tell you, no, we need you to spend this money and we need to spend it in the next 18 months, and you need to be able to grow 3x, 4x by that time and start showing that you have revenues. And the clock starts ticking. So you better actually do all the preliminary work of validating your idea with customers and making sure that you know what you want to build with before you raise your round. Because then, once you raise your seed round and you have money in the bank, you can get the things run in a much, much faster way, right?
Really, like, are there investors out there, or maybe this is about a decade ago, so maybe that was true then, but are there really any investors out there who would just invest millions or even a seed round without any validation, just in an idea?
I think it exists, right? I think today, I don't have enough data points, but I'm pretty sure that if someone comes today to investors and tell them a very good story about AI, they would probably manage to raise at least a small seed round and get it started. I think that more kind of sophisticated investors would probably ask for more. But this is, I think, the kind of difference between smart money and stupid money, right? Like, you can find investors that eventually will invest in you without doing this validation. 18 months ago, when the market was crazy and everyone, it was much easier to raise money, I'm pretty sure that there were a lot of startups that emerged without a real validation and without an MVP. And by the way, an MVP is not enough, because you can build an MVP. The question is whether this MVP is really validated, right? You can think that it's an MVP. You can it's probably kind of the minimum version of the product that you want. Whether it's viable and whether the market will really need it is something that you can validate only if you go to enough customers and eventually ask them, like, if they want to buy your product.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what happened next?
Yeah, so we shut down the startup after 4 years. It was a very painful process. Like, I disappointed a lot of people, disappointed myself, but I think this was actually the easier part. It's disappointing your employees, right? Like, it's people that basically you sold the dream to. You told them, yeah, you're going to join the most amazing venture of your lifetime. You're going to get all the financial benefits at the end of it. You're going to spend probably much more time and work much harder than in any other place that you worked for before, but with a lower salary. And then you have your investors that you kind of realize that you burned their money. Some of them were venture capital, right? So in a way, it's other people's money, but some of them are angel investors. It's their own money that they put out of their pocket and invested in you, and then you feel like you disappointed them. And lastly, you disappoint also your family, right? For a few years, you spend a lot of time, you work hard, you barely see them, and eventually you tell them, yeah, it's just a phase. At some point, we're gonna do this amazing exit, and we're gonna sell the company. By the way, a few months before we shut down the company, we did get an offer, kind of an initial offer, or in retrospect, it wasn't really an offer. This is something that you realize. It was more of an intent by another company to buy our company. It would probably not be this kind of amazing multi-$100 million exit. But it was probably good enough for us, but it didn't happen. After around a couple of months of negotiating with them, the CEO just didn't respond to us anymore. The CEO of the company that flew all the way to our office to meet us with the rest of the team, and everything looked very promising. And eventually, after a couple of months, they just stopped responding to us. Just stopped responding to our emails. And eventually, what we realized after a while, he left the company, and they told us the story on his side. He didn't manage to get the board to approve it, but they didn't even have the kind of the simple decency to just get back to us and tell us no. And apparently, it happens in business. When people are really interested in you, they're very nice to you, but at some point, where they stop experiencing interest, they just stop responding to you or interacting with you. So it was also disappointing, more disappointing, because we are already in this mindset that we're actually going to sell the company. 3 months later, we went to the board. We told them, look, we're going to shut down the company. We feel like we don't have, we'll not be able to recover from the situation that we are right now at, even if we raise more money. and we think that the best decision is actually to shut the company down. And so, it was disappointing everyone. And for a while, you feel like you are failing and that you are a disappointment. But I'm kind of a very analytical person. So first thing that I did was to reach out to our investors, at least to some of them. And I told them that I want to meet them personally. Now everything is kind of open and you can just be very transparent with them and they can be very transparent with you. And I asked them for feedback. I wasn't the CEO of the company. I was kind of number 2 in the company. I was managing the product and engineering, but still, they knew me. I had a seat in the board, and I still had a very good relationship with them. And I asked them, can you give me feedback? I want to see what I did wrong, what we did wrong. And it was actually very encouraging for me. They have a benchmark. They know that most startups fail. And each of them gave me a slightly different perspective of what we did wrong and how I can do better next time.
What did you do wrong?
A lot of things. So the first thing was, as I said, that we didn't do a proper market validation. We managed to raise our seed round, $1 million, without really doing proper market validation. We built an MVP, but really without checking whether the market needs it. I think that the other thing was that we weren't the best team to solve the problem that we were trying to solve. It was a B2C company. It started as a B2B company, and we pivoted to be a B2C company. I think that none of us really had experience with how to build a consumer business. It's not that you can't learn to build a consumer business, but I think that the mindset of all of us was more B2B. My co-founder, he was really into enterprise sales, right? He really knew how to do top-down sales, to reach out to kind of the senior management on the customer side. But we didn't really have any clue of how to create a consumer brand and how to market things for consumers. The third thing that I think that we did wrong was that we didn't really estimate the amount of effort and resources that it takes to really get our idea eventually scaling or get to a point where we can market it aggressively and that we can eventually reach enough markets. But I think these were just 3. I think I had a list of things that we did wrong, but I also had some conclusions around what I want to do, right? I felt that this wasn't really the type of thing that I want to work at. For instance, one of the things that, one of my conclusions or insights was that you can't really wake up every morning just to this long-term dream. Eventually, you need to enjoy your day-to-day work. This is something that I think that everyone that builds a startup should know. There are these high moments where you raise a round, where you close a deal with a customer and so on. But eventually, most of the time in between is your day job. It's really just going to work like anyone else. So you have the founder title, but eventually you just work for a company, right? You work for a company, you have board seat, but you need to enjoy your day to day, and everyone should ask themselves, will you enjoy your day to day doing this thing that you are doing? And I found that I really enjoy more complex technological problem. And the type of startup that we had back then wasn't very kind of deep tech. It was more around marketing, and it was really more around building the best user experience, but with not many kind of tech problems. So this was something that I was less attached to. And this is kind of one of the things that I wanted to fix with Fireblocks, building a venture that is very kind of deep tech and have more complex technological problems to solve.
But Fireblocks wasn't your next venture, was it?
So it wasn't really my next venture. Actually, one of the things that happened to people after you raise money from investors is, and I found it with a lot of people, if you are kind of traumatized by your startup experience with investors, instead of asking yourself whether you did something wrong, sometimes you say, one of the problems were that actually I raised money from investors and investors forced me to do this and that. And then the next thing that some people do, and this is what I did, I said, let's try a bootstrap. Like, I'm going to try a bootstrap. I'm going to build something on my own without investors. Actually, shortly after, I realized that it's even more difficult, right? Like, because when you raise money, you have more oxygen. You can hire people that are better than you. And one of the things that actually you realize also is that you're not good at everything. So one of the things that actually money allows you to do is to bring people that are better than you at things that you don't know how to do well. And I found myself in this kind of a glass ceiling where I started my own venture. Actually, it was a pretty cool idea. I managed to validate it with customers. It was a marketing automation tool, and we already got purchase orders from some customers. And then we wanted to kind of reach the next phase. And then I realized that it's very hard for me to do it without raising money. And then I went to investors. We started this process, and we got a term sheet. And I met the investor. It was a venture capital here in Israel, and they were pretty shocked. And the reason why they were shocked is that I went to the meeting, and I told them they had the term sheet in their hand. And I told them, no, I'm not going to take your money because I don't believe in this idea anymore. So this was kind of the first time that actually I declined a funding offering. And it might sound crazy because it's really hard to raise money. And some people say, if you have money, just take it. But for me, what I found out, and this was based on my last experience, is that if you are going to get this money, you're probably going to spend the next few years of your life working on this thing. And most likely you're going to be in what's called the valley of death. Startups usually don't get closed immediately, right? Most startups are in this phase called the valley of death, where you start your operations, you raise a certain amount of money, maybe not enough money to give you an endless run rate, but it can probably give you enough money for a year, 2 years, and then you don't manage to get to the next phase, which is to generate revenues. And then this was the thing that I was mostly afraid of, because I felt that I'm going to take this money and I'm going to be in this valley of death. And I need to explain again to my investors and to the employees and to my partner in life a couple of years later why I was doing this mistake again of starting another.
Why did you go to that meeting in the first place? Because you sort of initiated it.
Yeah, so I was already prepared for it. I already scheduled this meeting, and a day before, I actually told my founder. This is related to the story that I told before. This was the kind of my last breakup before founding Fireblocks. I called my partner, and I told him, look, I'm not gonna take money from this investor, and I don't believe in this idea anymore. And he told me, look, the right thing to do is you already scheduled the meeting with us. Let's go to the meeting and just tell him that we're not going to work on that anymore. And I told him, you can do it with by yourself. Why do you need me? And he told me it's all coupled together. The idea and us are it's kind of we're married together, because I think that we were the best team to actually execute this idea. And I told him it might be right, but I just don't believe in this idea anymore. And the first thing that we did was to basically give us this money. The next thing that we did was actually to break up, because I think that one of the things that we both realize is that it's not just about the idea, it's actually between our partnership and the fact that maybe we don't want to spend the next years of our life working together. Something that I didn't mention is actually that we hired our first employee a couple of weeks before. And then we told this employee, actually, you can take the idea if you believe in it and just execute it. And he was very enthusiastic to do that. But actually, a week later, he told us that he doesn't want to go for it. And he was disappointed. He was after things kind of, after he managed to digest this entire thing, he told us, look, actually, you sold me this amazing idea just a few weeks ago. And now you are telling me that you don't believe in it anymore. And I told him, look, I can swear to God that just a few weeks ago, this looked to me like the best idea in the world. And now it's actually not, I don't believe in it anymore. It happens. And I wanted to do it now. And I don't want to tell it to you in a year from now. So I'm doing it now, and I'm doing everyone a favor of just shutting it down now.
You have a lot of difficult conversations. Like, how are you so good at difficult conversations? It sounds like you do a lot of breakups and disappointments. Well, what is the key factors? Give me like 3 good ideas to do those difficult conversations.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I had so many of them, right? Like, I experienced, I think, maybe 2 times, right? In a way that is very, very challenging. Like, this was the second time. The last time was in 2011.
We have the employee, we have the investors, we have the partners. Okay, we have this in 3 different, like in this conversation, 3 different companies. But by the way, it's a really good skill set, right? There's no way to, not be the bad guy when something goes wrong. So like, what are like the secrets to that?
Yeah, so I think first of all is to be very direct and very transparent. Like, you don't need to sugarcoat it. You just need to express really what you feel and to be very genuine. I think this is one thing. The other is that I think that the most difficult conversation was actually with the employee, with my co-founder. Actually, he started another venture a few months later and managed to raise a very big round. So he called me and said, actually, you did a favor for both of us. But during that time, it was hard. I had this very emotional conversation with him, and I was very transparent with him. I told him, you're a very good friend. I really enjoy spending time with you outside work. I think we are both very successful. We have a chance to do very successful things. It's just that I feel that it's not going to be together. And I think that the experience told me or showed me that people, maybe the first reaction might be not always the easiest one, but I think that in retrospect, most people really appreciate it. With the investor, he was shocked, right? Because he wasn't really used to getting people telling that they don't take his money. But actually, he also called me around a month later, and he told me, "I want to thank you for not taking my money. You probably did the best decision in the world." So I think that most people just appreciate it in retrospect and not immediately. This is kind of part of the comfort that I have. But I think that you need to be very emotional. You need to be very empathic. And knowing that people might take it hard.
And Idan, where on your timeline was your involvement with C4 that you helped get acquired by Elbit?
Yeah, so I worked for C4 Security between 2008 to 2012. It was also a very interesting journey because I worked for a bootstrap. I think that one of the things that I learned there is how to run a business with very limited resources. We had very limited resources. We didn't raise any money from investors. I wasn't the founder. I was a founding team member. I was the first employee, but I was part of the executive team. And a big part of the conversation was actually around of how we managed to get this business running without ever raising money from investors. This was kind of the mindset of the founders. And in 2011, we got acquired by Elbit. I was there for a short time, basically just for my initial retention period for around a year. And then after a year, I left. I put aside some of my retention bonus. And the reason for that was that I didn't really want to work for a big corporate. Already a few years before, I realized that I want to build something on my own. And then working for a corporate, it might be really amazing for a lot of people, right? It's really comfortable working for a large company. And you don't really have to deal with all of the things that we had to deal with, which is how do we fund the next quarter and so on. but it wasn't for me. And I decided actually to quit, after around a year working for Elbit.
Right. And then with Fireblocks, where do you feel like you're now, based on all your experience, basically connecting the dots and that you're in the right place?
Yeah, so I think the journey that I had gave me so many different conclusions and insights that eventually I gathered all of them into this point of building Fireblocks, right? So all the conclusions around what I want to do and around the values that I want to give and how to build a startup the right way, what the sequence should be, eventually led me to where we are today. And it's not that we're not making mistakes. We're doing mistakes all the time, naturally. But at least I know that personally I'm not, or hope that I'm not making the same mistakes that I did last times.
And what would you say your superpower is?
So I would say a superpower might be really an overstatement, right? I'm a human being. But I think that one of the things, one of the traits that I have is that I'm very adaptive. I'm very flexible. I can adapt to new situations. And even when you just think about the journey of Fireblocks, I still carry pretty much the same title that I had from day one, but it's a completely different role. Right? Being a CTO or a CPO of a company in an early stage, when you have just 10 employees in the company, just 10 people, and you don't have product managers, is very different from running a 600 plus people company. And when you have a global operation with a large customer base, and you need to be very adaptive because you need to reinvent your role in the company pretty much all the time. And every quarter it just looks very different. I think that the other thing that I'm pretty good at is juggling different things. I can be a multitasker. I can start my day with one thing and end the day with another thing, and have in between hundreds of different things that I need to handle, and to be able to zoom in and zoom out. So I think these are kind of the two traits that really help me in my professional life, and I think also in my personal life.
And then what would be your weakness, your kryptonite?
Wow, I have so many weaknesses, but actually I use this platform as part of my therapy to try to fix one of my weaknesses, which is that I'm considered a pretty critical person. I'm mostly self-critical. I criticize myself on a daily basis, but I think that I'm also critical to others. And when I tell people, look, I know that I criticize you, but actually I'm self-critical. The person that I criticize the most is myself. It doesn't give them any comfort, right? They don't care about it. And I think that in some areas it actually helps giving people feedback. But the fact that I'm also very blunt, like this combination of being very critical and very blunt, doesn't always achieve what I want to achieve, right? I do it really just from the mere fact that I want to improve things. But in some cases, it just that I can become too critical, and I'm now working on that, to kind of realize that not everything is perfect and you can change people. And in some cases that my criticism is not always right. So they say that the first kind of step towards recovery, right, is to admit that you have a problem, right? So here I say it publicly that I have this problem that I'm trying to fix. So here you go.
I'm not sure how much you truly want to fix it because it's also working for you, but I guess that's something
Definitely.
that you're sort of maybe at the
Critical.
edges. Maybe being critical.
Maybe he's critical to himself.
Right, I want to balance it and use it only when it's appropriate. That's I would say the right thing to do.
Okay, that's fair. And what's your goal with Fireblocks?
So we are now, as I said, we are a 600 plus people company. We have a pretty large customer base. We have over 1,600 customers worldwide, and we're actually things are working very well for us. But we are now focusing on growing and expanding to more use cases, more products. More markets. One of the challenges that we have is how to scale the company, how to scale the culture, how to scale the business, how to make sure that although we are now a global company, we manage to preserve the values that we had from day one. So all the things that are really around the growth of the company and the scale of the company is our main focus. And in a few years from now, we hope that Fireblocks will be a much larger company with a lot more impact on the industry.
Do you hope to sell it one day?
So I think that we're not anymore in this state where we're actually able to sell the company, right? Like our last valuation was $8 billion. So I don't think there are too many acquirers for this kind of ballpark. But I do expect the company in one day to become public. I think this is probably the more reasonable path for us.
Yeah, makes sense. Idan, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, man.
Thank you guys.
We're looking forward to hear about your IPO.
And if someone wants to look him up,
where can people find you, on LinkedIn, anywhere else?
They can find me on mostly on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, but I think the best way to find me is really LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, if you have a moment, we would really appreciate it if you could rate and review our podcast on the platform you're listening to. This will help others find our show. And as always, if you know anyone who you think would enjoy our podcast, please share it with them. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back as usual on the 1st of the month.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive.
Real life.
Superpowers.